Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Helen Kronberger, Director, International Education at Austrade, and I'm joined today by a panel of expert presenters on VET and Skills TNE. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the many and diverse lands on which we gather virtually today. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us. Austrade is the Australian government agency responsible for the global promotion of Australia's education and training offering and for supporting Australian providers to grow and diversify internationally, including through partnerships and TNE. For us, skills delivery forms an important part of Australia's bilateral and multilateral relationships, and it's why you'll so often see a skills clause or two embedded in our free trade agreements. Skills delivery, or skills diplomacy even, includes meeting the needs of the learner primarily, of course, but also the needs of communities, of businesses, economies, and societies. So much of what Australia needs and so much of what our international partners and indeed the world needs is tied to skills. As a quick example, according to the World Economic Forum's 2025 Future of Jobs report, 62% of Southeast Asian workers are expected to require reskilling or upskilling by 2030. So Austrade is very interested and active in seeking to align Australia's skills offering and capability with the needs of our international partners, and then identifying opportunities for cooperation for our providers, for you. So we know that Australia does skills delivery incredibly well. There's plenty of evidence of that, whether that's through accredited programs or bespoke training. And there are so many opportunities, but there are also challenges and hurdles to overcome as well. So this session is being provided as part one of a brand new series of webinars focused on VET and Skills TNE. Earlier this year, in March, you may have attended our webinar series on higher education TNE delivery, and those recordings remain available at Austrade's Education Data and Insights, or EDI platform, if you're interested. But today we're bringing you the essential elements to consider when establishing or expanding a VET or Skills TNE program. Following this session, we'll also be running region-focused VET sessions where our offshore colleagues at Post will outline the opportunities that they are seeing in country. So onshore and offshore, we work really closely with our counterparts across the Australian government, and this includes working with colleagues from the Department of Education, from DUA, TEXA, ASQA, and DFAT, who all create the government-to-government and regulatory context internationally to make our collective TNE work possible. So today you'll hear from Kim Holthouse, Director International VET Policy at the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, followed by Karen Kerr, Assistant Director Policy and Education at ASQA. Then Saga Bahadur from Acumen will introduce VET opportunities in Southeast Asia and South Asia, and that'll help us set the scene for an upcoming session on South Asia. And Chris Hogg, Global Business Development Manager at Chisholm Institute, will share some insights into Chisholm's TNE operations. We do have a lot to get through, but we'll still aim for some Q&A at the end. So please post your questions using the Q&A function at the top of your screen at any time during the presentations. And if we run out of time to answer any last questions as we go, we'll be working with the relevant speakers to create and share responses via EDI. And we'll also be using your questions and comments to help guide new webinar content, new EDI content, and helping our offshore network seek out opportunities for you around the world. So, bit of housekeeping, please remain on mute. Please also note that this session is being recorded and that the recording will be retained and available via the EDI platform. So, let's get on with our experts. I'm now going to pass over to Kim, and I'll circle back to spend some Q&A time with you at the end. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Helen, for your introductory remarks. As Helen said, so I'm from Department of Employment and Workplace Relations and lead government policy on international VET. So I'm going to start off by just providing a little bit of an overview of government's policy framework for TNE, a snapshot of current activity, identify some challenges that we recognise for international vet delivery, and some of the ways that government supports providers and the sector more broadly. So in short, government strongly supports quality education and training providers exploring opportunities to deliver offshore. This priority was reflected in the draft International Education and Skills Strategic Framework that the government released last year. It's safe to assume that expanding offshore delivery will remain a key focus of the updated framework, which we expect will be released next year once finalised. And the reasons for this are many. Offshore delivery allows more students to access Australia's world-class training, including those who might not consider or be able to travel to Australia. It also supports workforce and economic development in the Indo-Pacific region. It promotes awareness of Australia's training system, positioning Australia as a partner of choice, and it can provide new pathways to onshore study in Australia. So all of which, as Helen mentioned, it supports Australia's soft power diplomacy, our national wealth, and our standing with our regional partners, which are things that our education and skills ministers have noted frequently in various forums of late, including most recently Assistant Minister Hill at the International Education Conference. The government's Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040 highlights that Southeast Asia's growing middle classes and youth population are driving demand for both university and vet qualifications. The Department of Education is leading development of a transnational education roadmap for Southeast Asia as one of the actions out of the strategy. In South Asia, particularly in India, we see growing awareness of the importance of vet in skilling a rapidly expanding young population. And India is rapidly building its national training system to that end. And in many respects, that's informed by aspects of Australia's training system. Better understanding of Australia's training system and closer alignment with it in the training systems of our partner countries can only help to create more opportunities for Australian vet providers offshore. So that's really a key focus of our G2G engagement, including forums such as the Australia-India Education and Skills Council, which will meet in India in December, and various working groups at official level. In terms of current levels of TNE activity in vet, it's not at the same level that we see in higher education, and we probably all understand some of the reasons for that, both in terms of the institutional capacity that's required and also differences between the two markets. But we do see in recent data that there is some growth in offshore delivery of vet qualifications from Cert 3 to diploma level, so there are some encouraging signs there. We know from activity reported by NCVR that Australian vet providers are delivering nationally recognised training in 36 countries at the moment, to over 20,000 international students in 2024. The most popular fields in terms of fields of education, business and management, food and hospitality, and human welfare studies. TAFEs accounted for more than 80% of all of those offshore enrolments in nationally recognised training, which probably indicates the level of institutional capacity that's needed to invest in scalable, high-quality offshore delivery. However, we also know that NCVR data may not be capturing the full extent of training delivery that's happening offshore, as well as other forms of vet collaboration more broadly that might be happening. TNE delivery can be designed around partnerships with institutions, industry and government. In India, we've seen an Australian provider establish a successful industry-based partnership focused on knowledge transfer. So there are things that might not be being picked up by the NCVR data. And there's also non-accredited training, which I'll say more about shortly, that's also not necessarily reported by providers, doesn't get picked up in the NCVR reporting of nationally recognised training. DUA certainly recognises, as the government does more broadly, that there are some challenges in delivering offshore, particularly for VET. VET qualifications have been developed by industry, for the delivery in Australia to prepare people to work in the Australian workforce. So they may not always be the perfect fit for offshore delivery to meet local skills needs. Mandatory industry placements and workplace assessments can be difficult or sometimes impossible to facilitate offshore in ways that meet training package requirements. And delivering nationally recognised training obviously requires significant financial investment. Price sensitivity for VET in offshore markets can make it difficult to cover the costs of developing and maintaining a qualified trainer and assessor workforce, particularly in high-cost programs like engineering, health, or the building trades. There is obviously also the need to meet both Australian and local regulatory requirements, and that adds to complexity and cost. So we understand that developing offshore VET programs is a complex and long-term investment. In many cases, development of and delivery of non-accredited training that's designed specifically for local industry needs may be an effective way to overcome some of those issues. And we are supportive of providers finding those solutions to meet local needs. The key, however, is obviously that whether the training is accredited or non-accredited, the quality is essential to make sure that we're building the trust with our partners and protecting the brand that makes offshore delivery possible for all providers in the first place. I know Karen will probably touch more on that later, so I won't say too much more about that. The government, in terms of Australia, the Australian government's role, the government supports the TNE efforts of providers in a range of ways. The Department of Education has implemented a couple of projects to model potential new forms of collaboration offshore in the mining and agriculture sectors in Latin America and India, respectively. DUA engages with officials from some of our key partner countries on a regular basis who are very interested in understanding Australia's national training system. Officials often express a lot of interest in having Australian VET providers delivering in their countries. And this also presents opportunities for DUA to explain the strengths of our system and to potentially raise any regulatory or other market access issues that could help Australia providers to deliver into those markets. So we would welcome any input from providers who might be considering TNE and have identified any such issues. Of course, the Department of Education, as the policy lead for international education more broadly, also advocates for the sector on those kinds of market access issues. And another practical form of support that the government provides for international providers is the Education Counsellor Network. And I would strongly encourage providers that are already or delivering or considering exploring opportunities to reach out to the relevant counsellor network through the Australian Embassy, as those counsellor teams have access to a lot of information and might be able to put you in touch with potential partners as well. I just want to say a little bit about the managed growth settings under Ministerial Direction 111, which is, as many of you would be aware, the way that the government is implementing its approach to managing the growth in the onshore international sector. Ministerial Direction number 111 on student visa prioritisation includes an exemption for certain forms of transnational education arrangements. Details around those exempted arrangements are in a fact sheet on our website. I just wanted to flag that those will be updated to support a new ministerial direction, which is we expect to be released in coming weeks. So it's just to keep an eye out for that. And I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to the Q&A session at the end. But I'll leave it there for now and hand over to Karen from ASQA. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kim. And I will be parroting a little bit of what Kim touched on in terms of this sector. But first, I'm Karen Kerr. I'm an assistant director in ASQA's policy and education team. Australia, as a refresher for some of you, because I know many of you are RTOs, is the national regulator for vocational education and training. We regulate providers that deliver VET qualifications and courses to students in Australia or are offered to Australian or offer Australian qualifications internationally. We also regulate providers that deliver VET courses to overseas students, so that our CRECOS register, and certain providers that are delivering the ELICOS courses. Our purpose is truly to ensure quality vocational education and training, so that students, employers, government, and the community have confidence in the integrity of national qualifications issued by training providers. Today, I'm just going to do a quick sector snapshot about those providers delivering offshore and some of our most recent data, and then just touch on the regulatory obligations for providers delivering offshore and some risks and considerations for those providers considering delivery offshore. So next slide, please, Hannah. So there are about 58 Australian providers that have reported delivery offshore in 2024. And I'm going to go on from Kim's 36 countries, but our data shows 43 countries that providers are delivering that offshore. Approximately, they delivered to 20,500 students in the offshore markets. We do have a range of countries that there is delivery, but really we're seeing a lot in East Asia and Oceania in terms of that delivery. But I popped up here on the screen kind of the top countries by the RTOs delivering in them and by students. So in terms of top countries for providers delivering, Papua New Guinea has 16 providers delivering in country. New Zealand has 11, Vietnam has 9, China has 8, and Malaysia has 6. And then by student numbers, China has just over 9,500 students they delivered to through VET providers in China. VET providers in Sri Lanka had just over 2,000 students they delivered to. VET providers in India delivered to just over 1,500 students. Fiji had VET providers delivering to just over 1,000, and Papua New Guinea had just 785 students they delivered to in VET. The number of Australian providers delivering offshore since pre-pandemic has declined. So in 2019, we did have 92 providers that had identified delivering VET offshore. And so there is about a 37% decrease, but we have seen a resurgence. The lowest number we had was in 2023, which was down to around 40. So we are seeing a growth in the space of people coming back to delivering offshore following the recovery from the pandemic. The number of offshore students enrolled as well has declined since 2019, which can be expected. We fell down to from 25,000 to currently 20,000, but we have seen an increase again from 2023. So we're seeing a slow growth happening over the last 2 years. Hannah, next slide, please. So what are the regulatory requirements for providers delivering offshore? RTOs delivering offshore must meet the exact same requirements of those providers delivering domestically. So there are no specific differences between delivering domestically and offshore. You must still meet compliance with the VET quality framework.
So that is inclusive of our 2025 standards that just came into enforcement in July. So that includes our outcome standards, compliance requirements, credentials policy, but also includes our data provision requirements for reporting, and then obviously meeting the Australian qualifications framework in terms of the training packages being delivered. Some of the key reminders that we put out there for providers delivering offshore is that those delivery sites need to be notified to ASQA as detailed in the data provision requirements. So just to get a little technical, if you're delivering a course offshore, if that delivery site has not been identified in our ASQAnet system, that needs to be done per course. So it's very easy to do. Just go in and do a material change form, a minor change form, and identify the delivery site to the course. Conversely, if you stop or cease delivering at that delivery site or cease delivering a course at that delivery site offshore, that needs to also be notified through the same mechanism. So it's quite easy. It's self-service. You can go into our ASQAnet portal and sort that out. So moving from our regulatory requirements, we are currently undertaking a offshore review in terms of how the sector is operating offshore and considering our regulatory oversight and whether or not it's sufficient, noting some of the risks that can be emerging. So from this project that I've been so lucky to lead, we've had some great insights from providers that are currently delivering offshore. They've come into interviews and given us some really good insights. As Kim mentioned, the education counselor networks we've been working with, we've been discussing with Austrade and trying to gather a real sense of the current state of offshore to understand what, if there are any next steps in terms of ASQA's regulatory oversight of offshore, because we currently have great mechanisms already in place that we can utilize if we need to step up regulation offshore. But right now we think we're at a really good balance set. But the key risks that we have pulled from this project is that, as Kim had mentioned, the investment into facilities and resources is a big risk. There needs to, everything that's delivered offshore needs to meet that Australian standard of delivery. What is depicted in the training packages can't be altered, that must meet that standard. So there's a huge investment often required to set up facilities or ensure resources. If there's a work placement component, that is very tricky. And we do see certain modes of delivery where theory is done offshore and then people are brought onshore for the assessment purposes through student visas, because it's just not possible to deliver the practical offshore. Again, trainers and assessors, making sure your trainers and assessors meet the credential policy, and that from our interviews with providers has been a tricky thing to do, to find local trainers and assessors. Often they are sending their own trainers and assessors offshore to deliver, to ensure that they have the right trainers and assessors delivering those qualifications to ensure the quality that's being delivered. Additionally, some of the risks that have been identified is just monitoring operations from a distance. And this is more from our smaller providers that don't have a big infrastructure, governance infrastructure. It's very hard to monitor any sort of day-to-day operations offshore. And if you're aware of all the requirements under the standards, there is a need to have strong governance and oversights and policies and procedures in place, and ensuring that they are being put into place and utilized as required. And finally, one of the other big key risks that have been identified is just understanding the political and cultural environments that you're working in. There's a lot of nuance in different countries, different regions. They're beyond obviously being a registered training organization in Australia. There may be registration requirements, licensing requirements that might not be apparent at first glance. And so, as Kim had mentioned, reaching out to the education counselor network is a great way to start those conversations so they understand on the ground what is required to be successful. Additionally, Austrade, the first step being in this webinar is great. But Austrade does have a lot of resources. From a regulatory standpoint, we acknowledge that we haven't had a lot of guidance for delivering offshore, and we are committing to updating guidance for providers wanting to deliver, intending to, and currently delivering offshore, to make sure that we have the right advice out there about how you take those first steps to getting established offshore with your vet delivery. I'm going to stop talking now because I feel like I've been going way past my time, and I'm going to pass over to Saga to continue. You're on mute, Saga.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep, that's great.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome. I'm Sagar Bahadur, the Executive Director for Asia and Head of Regional Strategy at Acumen, part of Sanam S4 Group. And it's a real pleasure to be here today with Austrade and colleagues from across Australia and Asia to talk about a topic that's close to my heart, how South and Southeast Asia together with India are shaping up to be the next big frontier for skills and vocational education collaboration. Over the next few minutes, I'll talk about what's changing across these regions, the best policy shifts, the market opportunities, and how Australia can partner more deeply to meet these fast evolving skill needs. Next slide. So let's start with Southeast Asia, and because it's such a fascinating story of growth and momentum. So the region today has over 450 million workers, with about 11 million young people entering the workforce every year. Now, that's a massive ongoing demand for skills development and employability pathways. When you look at countries like Malaysia, which already shows impact of strong TVET systems, 94% plus of their graduates are employed. When you look at Vietnam, they've already set a goal of 70% of their youth to be vocationally trained by 2030, and it's on track. The digital economy across these regions heads towards a USD 300 billion by next year. Demand for training in AI, automation, logistics, and green technology is really exploding in the region now. We're also seeing some real smart policy frameworks like Indonesia's Link and Match program and ASEAN's Quality Reference Framework, which are connecting industry more tightly with education. Importantly, countries, governments in Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia are actively inviting foreign providers to collaborate through joint certification, train the trainer programs, and institutional partnerships. But here's the real opportunity, that it's still a $10 billion annual funding gap that vocational training for Southeast Asia is required. And that signals an urgent need for industry-led, scalable, internationally benchmarked programs. And that's where I think the Australian expertise fits perfectly well. Next slide, please. Now, moving westwards, South Asia is equally vibrant, but I think it's a different set of dynamics. If you look at some of the countries that I've listed out, so if you take Bangladesh, the government's National Skill Development Policy of 2022 and the Skills 21 program are driving huge momentum. I think the focus is on textiles, construction, healthcare, ICT, and sectors that could create over 5 million jobs by 2030. So that's a big region that we can look at. And with the World Bank support, Bangladesh is actively seeking international web partnerships, particularly through public-private collaborations. When you look at Nepal, there's rapid expansion again in ICT, tourism, hospitality, and the government aims to place 500,000 skilled youth abroad each year. I'll very quickly share a case study in the end, but Nepal is a big part of that as well. They're very open to dual hybrid online delivery models, and there's strong interest in teacher training and digital pedagogy. Going to Sri Lanka, in its post-crisis rebuilding, it's emphasizing on employability, sustainability, maritime skills, and all aligning with the ASEAN qualification frameworks to attract global collaboration. In Pakistan, reforms under the TTC are focusing on digital skills, renewable energy, women's workforce participation, and with policy frameworks that actually encourage foreign accredited vocational programs. So across South Asia, governments are clearly open, proactive, and the region is ripe for partnerships that combine international quality with local delivery. Next slide, please. Now, India, and I'm just going to quickly run through the skills revolution, how the new education policy 2020 has created more avenue, and what's the policy landscape looking like. It's not just the biggest region, but also I think now a policy trendsetter, for the region as well. So the National Education Policy 2020 is transforming India from a degree-driven system to a skills-powered economy, which is a major mindset shift that you'll be seeing in India. For the first time, vocational education is introduced from grade 6, with the goal of reaching 50% of our students across some kind of vocational exposure within the next 2 to 3 years. India already has now 20 plus skills universities, 15,000 plus industrial training institutes, and 500 sector skill councils, a scale unmatched anywhere in the world at this point. And what's truly exciting is the regulatory openness. The UGC, the AICTE, the NCVET are all statutory bodies regulating education across higher ed vocation, and now all allowing foreign partnerships in skills, education, and transnational delivery as well. Australian institutions can now co-deliver applied degrees, offer micro credentials, and have those officially recognized in India as well. Now that's a fundamental shift for India, and for Australia, it opens doors to sustainable, scalable collaborations, which can be done beyond mobility as well into joint delivery, curriculum integration, and capacity building. Next slide. We were very fortunate to do a skills study for the Austrade called the India Skills Horizon, which basically showed the opportunity for Australia and India. And our joint report really helps put the scale and urgency into perspective. So India, and I'm just listing out very brief highlights from that report. So India will need to add 250, India will add 250 million new workers by 2040, but 80% of them currently lack formal skills training. So that's a big need there. Only 4.7% of India's workforce has received vocational education. And now you compare that with 75% of that in Australia. So that gap represents both, I think, a challenge, but also an enormous opportunity for us. Nearly half of India's graduates are underemployed, meaning the skills mismatch is real. Employers say 70% of the candidates don't have the right job-ready skills, and only 1 out of 5 training providers has strong industry linkages as of now. But the market is staggering. The skills training sector is expected to reach a $30 billion figure by 2030, growing at 18% annually. And 65% of young learners now prefer short job-oriented programs, with the bulk of demand coming from Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities in India. This is where I think the collaboration matters, bringing together Australia's strong industry-driven direct models with India's massive scale and youth energy. Next slide. Let me just very quickly again talk about where does this synergy actually lie. So by 2030, India alone will see 85 million new roles in digital and AI, 10 million in green skills, and a 2.4 million workforce gap in healthcare. Logistics manufacturing will see a 25% workforce growth under the Make in India initiative. Each of these sectors mirrors Australia's core strength, from advanced manufacturing to renewables to healthcare, agriculture, and hospitality. So the opportunity to co-create pathways that combine Australia's training excellence with scale, reach, and policy backing of India in the region. Next slide, please. Now, I'll just give a very brief case study of what, let's say, another country is doing and if there are any learnings that we can take. So I deliberately mentioned Japan, where there's a lot happening in the Japan-India skills partnership, and I think it's a great model for global workforce collaboration. And before we talk about next step, let's just look at this model and how it's working beautifully in India and Japan. So through the technical intern training program and the specified skills worker framework, the two countries have created a structured ecosystem connecting training, certification, and employment. Over 15,000 Indians have already been trained or placed in Japan with a target of 100,000 by 2030. They're now Japan India Institute of Manufacturing, Japan enrolled courses in Indian universities, providing Japanese standard training. What makes it work is the industry-led, quality assured, and culturally integrated design backed by their government agencies like JETRO, JICA, and from India, NSDC International. It's a model that Australia can adapt as well to pairing technical expertise with cultural readiness and workforce mobility. Next slide, please. So what's next? Some of the action items that we keep talking to a few of the partners and maybe some few as well. How do we really turn these opportunities potential into progress? And some of the few practical steps to move from awareness to action is something that I've listed out here. So I think it's the most important part is to identify and onboard partner institutions, can be universities, polytechnics, skills universities, and how to embed Australian certified programs within them. We're talking about large scale implementation and access here. The second is around co-designing stackable qualifications with Australian TAFEs, RTOs, making them modular and making them industry ready, relevant for India. I think very important to invest in faculty training, digital pedagogy, and through train the trainer programs, given the scale that, of course, we're talking about here as well. Integrating industry partnerships, how do we bring apprenticeship, internships, and on-site learning into this model will also be the key. And then I think most importantly, and has how it was mentioned at the start itself, that working with policy bodies, with NSDCs, the University Grants Commission, AICTE, which looks into technical education, I think it will just ensure a smooth recognition of Australian qualifications under India's framework. And I think that's where the real transformation can happen, not through one-off initiatives, but through sustained partnerships that build mutual capacity and regional impact. So I think just to wrap up and be within the time, I think across Southeast Asia, South Asia, and India, we're seeing powerful convergence, which is basically governments pushing reforms, industries demanding skills and talent, and learners looking for meaningful employable education. And Australia's wet ecosystem is ideally positioned to meet that momentum with its strong focus on quality, relevance, and industry alignment. At Acumen, we're very proud of helping connect these dots between policy, practice, and partnership. And we truly believe that this is the space where collaboration can redefine how nations skill their next generation. So thank you, and I look forward to taking your questions in the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Agar, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be a part of this webinar in this Austrade TNE series. My name is Chris Hogg, and I'm Global Business Development Manager at Chisholm Institute of TAFE. In this introductory webinar, I'll be sharing a bit about a resourcing and development approach from the perspective of a public vet provider, including the following topics: Chisholm's current TNE footprint, TNE support structure and international development approach, including strategic alignment and market selection, some key stakeholder considerations, the rationale for cyclical reviews, and a few of the challenges and opportunities that we currently have. A lot of what I'll be talking about today has a China context, which accounts for most of our TNE activity at present. Next slide, please, Hannah. So in terms of qualification delivery, China is our strongest and longest market, with some of our existing partnerships enduring for over 20 years. We currently deliver 5 different qualifications in 9 different locations. This includes both accredited and unaccredited programs. Unaccredited qualifications were previously accredited, but when the training packages were updated, the accredited delivery was no longer considered viable. We also deliver accredited allied health programs in Sri Lanka, including the Cert 3 in individual support, aging and disability specializations, the Cert 4 in aging support, and the Cert 4 in disability. As with most providers, our preferred market entry strategy to date has been contractual arrangements, which exist in various forms of third-party agreements, given the legacy aspect at Chisholm. The development costs and risks are minimal with this sort of model, and we are comfortable sharing our IP with partners that have been through a robust due diligence process. In some cases, you can expect offshore delivery partners to prefer using their own contractual templates. It's up to each institution to determine how much risk they may wish to expose themselves to. But for Chisholm, we're most comfortable using our own legal templates. But where a partner insists on using their own contracts, we only agree to this after review by our legal team and adding any components missing from our template as a schedule. And some clauses and sections may be non-negotiable. Next slide, please, Hannah. So a huge amount of work goes into developing and delivering successful TNE programs that meet quality and compliance standards whilst delivering commercial outcomes. So institutions must ensure they have dedicated resources to support sustainable TNE projects. Chisholm Solutions, which is led by the Chief Commercial Officer, is the business area for setting and achieving revenue targets from domestic and international sources. Within Chisholm Solutions, there is a very strong appetite for both commercially viable domestic and international projects. As far as TNE delivery goes, Chisholm Solutions has a centralised international projects and partnerships, or IPP, business area, which is the red box in this organisational chart. IPP is the primary point of contact for contract management and project coordination. Team roles are outlined in the chart, and there is a strong Chinese language capability, which is essential for the China market. The main role of the administrative officer is to coordinate travel arrangements in accordance with our travel policy. We also have a dedicated resource for delivery of the Cert 4 in TAE, which underpins all of our TNE initiatives in VET. And the IPP team is led by the head of commercial delivery. Outside of IPP, our delivery areas, or faculties, as they're known at universities, are obviously key stakeholders in all of our TNE initiatives. So within our structure, we have education managers within the delivery areas, providing the necessary academic support in terms of standards, compliance, academic quality, and so forth, for the delivery of both accredited and unaccredited qualifications offshore. In some cases, such as in the engineering delivery area, which has multiple offshore projects, the education manager may be fully dedicated to international projects. The viability of projects depends on the capacity of teaching staff to deliver a portion of the training in accordance with the expectations of the overseas partner, as we don't employ teachers offshore, although I'm aware this is an option which some other providers are using. The key message here is that in terms of delivery and governance, TNE projects require a significant amount of resources. So before embarking on any TNE journey, institutions must ensure they have both the capacity and capability to deliver their products offshore. Next slide, please, Hannah. That said, even with the capacity and capability, delivery is not the starting point, obviously, of an institution's TNE journey. Determining what to deliver, where to deliver it, how to deliver it, and who to deliver it with requires a lot of groundwork, which is my main responsibility. My role sits within Chisholm Solutions, but outside of the international projects and partnerships business area. Essentially, I'm responsible for driving new revenue growth from international partnerships. In this sense, I'm not limited to TNE, as I also develop bids and tender submissions for international development projects, and where successful, play a key role in delivering those projects. But as far as TNE goes, I lead on establishing new international contracts and expanding existing international partnerships. So how do I go about this? A strategic plan and international strategy is what provides the focus. Chisholm's vision in its 2025 to 2029 strategic plan is empowered local communities with global impact. In the context of a public vet provider with a core remit of servicing the domestic market, delivery areas are under pressure to meet the demands of the domestic market. Mobilising resources to support international projects would not be achievable if internationalisation through TNE or development projects were not part of the organisation's strategic direction. So within our strategic plan, we have specific goals and objectives that relate to this vision of having an impact globally. For example, as leaders in applied learning, we share expertise locally and globally. Chisholm's motivation for TNE is primarily commercial, although as a public provider, we are mindful of how our TNE initiatives support broader government priorities. Our motivations for a TNE strategy may vary across institutions, but whatever that may be, it's important that any strategy is supported at the highest level. Obviously, for us, a prolonged presence in the China market has given us both expertise, networks, and brand awareness. So there are opportunities for Chisholm to establish new or expand existing partnerships. Previous experience within a market is one of the key factors when identifying new markets. There are multiple ways to achieve this exposure. Development projects is one. In Vietnam, Chisholm's delivered 2 major development projects, one being with the former Directorate of Vocational Education and Training, and more recently with Oz for Skills, which is a DFAT program. And in Cambodia, we're also involved with the Asian Development Bank Skills for Future Economies Sector Development Project, which will provide opportunities for us moving forward in TNE and recruitment. Where this level of prior engagement doesn't exist, institutions new to TNE may be able to leverage brand awareness they've established in some markets through successful onshore recruitment strategies. Alternatively, establishing a brand presence through indirect market entry strategies may be an option. For example, there are MOOC platforms. Some of these may be private, others might be government. For example, in Indonesia, with the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform under the Catalyst program. The presence of state and federal agencies or private third-party consulting organisations such as Acumen provide valuable support networks for TNE development. And for us, a number of the more advanced pipeline projects that we are developing at the moment were sourced through Austrade and global VIC channels, such as in-market visits and EOAs. So there are a number of options when it comes to a market entry strategy, but irrespective of which one may suit individual institutions best, the first step should always be market research. And one of the best frameworks that I've used in the past is the PESTLE framework, which looks at political, economic, socio-cultural, technological, legal, and environmental factors. And there are plenty of state and federal government resources, Asia Business Link Act, available to provide guidance in these areas. Considering all of these factors provides a foundation for the establishment of the business case for a market. And those of you who may have attended IEAA's TNE forum this year would have heard that the partnership business case is one of the top 3 most important things for establishing a successful TNE arrangement. Next slide, please, Anna. Obviously, in my role, I collaborate closely with senior management, IPP, and delivery area colleagues, but there are a number of other key internal stakeholders, including our academic quality team. who we partner with on compliance aspects and third-party management. Our finance team, who provide support with costings, legal to ensure we're not exposed to any material risk through our agreements, and learning design and technologies for LMS support, liaison with host campus IT staff, and so on. In terms of external stakeholders, keep in mind that whilst student drivers are obviously important, there are a range of market dynamics to be considered, including the needs and objectives of local TNE regulatory bodies and the needs of local industry, as we've heard. In the development phase, where you're looking at partner selection, my advice to any institution seeking to identify suitable TNE partners is firstly to know your value proposition. So what problems are you trying to solve, and what do you think you can do better than other existing TNE providers in the market? Second, be clear and firm on your own strategic objectives for TNE, but flexible and creative in details of the implementation, particularly concerning academic models and contractual terms. Through multiple rounds of partner negotiations, you're likely to end up with academic models much better than what may have been initially conceived. It's also important to understand your ideal partner profile and discuss expectations early. Again, particularly around fundamentals such as prospective cohort sizes, tuition fees, delivery costs, understanding the partner's longer-term organisational goals and motivation for TNE programs as well, whether that's accredited or unaccredited solutions, which one might be more appropriate or preferred. This will help with the efficiency of working through what is often more opportunities than you can pursue. The interests of local TNE regulatory bodies and industry will usually be longer term, and so have the potential to mitigate factors which can have shorter term effects on student demand, such as the Australian regulatory framework around student mobility and its alignment with TNE, economic, social, or geopolitical disruptions. Again, back to the PESL framework, if you've given due consideration to the political environment, economic resilience and stability are likely to be fundamental reasons that support market entry. If you consider temporary disruptions that have occurred over the years in some of Australia's largest markets and will likely continue to occur, you'll realise that short-term risks need not be deterrents. So whilst it's important to be mindful of these factors and have flexibility in models which can allow institutions to adapt, I'd advise against designing a model purely around what might work best around some of the finer points or details around current policy environment. Broadly speaking, Australian government policy settings are supportive of TNE, and that provides the underlying stability needed. If the TNE offering aligns with the long-term vision and needs of local regulatory bodies and industry, there will always be opportunities for students to obtain outcomes despite policy shifts or geopolitical tension. And China's a good example. Whilst regulations are in place to protect Chinese students in TNE, the needs of the state generally transcend the needs of students when it comes to their TNE regulatory settings. As we've heard as well, obviously as a key stakeholder for us, but as a dual sector institution, TEX is also important. As with strategy, there's a need to review any projects. Sorry, previous slide, Hannah. As with strategy, there's a need to review any projects that have been implemented. And as mentioned, a number of our Chinese projects are legacy items. To be fair, some were reactive in their inception. For some of these, we're at a point where we need to review the suitability and viability moving forward. 20 years ago, Chisholm didn't have its higher education college with a range of bachelor degrees that we have now. So with the emergence of the higher education college as a new internal stakeholder, we need to consider how we can best leverage our TNE capability and capacity to meet their objectives as well. Again, over the past 20 years, VET policy and TNE policy in China has undergone substantial reform. New categories of institutions have emerged, such as the undergraduate vocational universities, which in some cases may be a better fit for the type of institution that Chisholm has grown into. This means we need to reevaluate if the type of institution we partner with in the past is still the best option, and if the type of student that those older programs attract are still the type of student that our expanded product offering now suits. Other aspects of partnership that need to be reviewed periodically include delivery requirements, particularly for accredited vet programs, costs and ROI, and the outcomes for students, industry, and local regulatory authorities as key stakeholders. At the end of a review, it's not just a question of allowing partnership to dissolve or be renewed. It's important to maintain a growth mindset and consider if there are opportunities to elevate or expand a relationship. Final slide. Thanks, Hannah. So I'll finish my presentation by listing a few of the challenges and opportunities that Chisholm as an experienced TNE provider faces. Finding the right partner for mutually beneficial outcomes is one of the most difficult, and that includes where the potential exists for charging the fees required to sustain the scale that can be achieved. For lower cost vet products, the financial burden associated with complying with the 4 1/3 rule in China means increased price pressures that cannot always be passed on to students. We're also looking at how we fully implement an LMS system in China and new projects in new markets where we have capacity. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Amazing, Chris. Thank you. Thank you to all of the speakers so far. So what an unbelievable resource. I hope that everybody who's joined will access the recording, and I hope that you'll come back and back and back to it, because there's so many layers here outlining what I imagine might seem like a bit of an overwhelming level of complexity in some ways and in the how to get started. But if you really go back over everything that's been covered, it's not only the size of the opportunity and all of the considerations, but there's also some fantastic advice throughout each speaker's deck and notes about next steps and things to consider. I would also just add to all of that amazing information, which is really a thesis on TNE. Thank you so much, everybody. I would also add deep consideration of why you are seeking to evolve or establish a vet TNE program, why it fits with your provider's strategy, what exactly it is that you're hoping to achieve in building a TNE program, and then that will support you in testing that why against all of the partnership considerations and risk assessments, and in building your value proposition, as Chris has so clearly articulated just now. So I would really encourage you to have a think about the why. It's also going to help you to prosecute any arguments in favour of TNE internally within your organisations and be able to assess and answer any queries around risk associated with the establishment of that, and indeed the long-term vision for the why, the long-term vision, the long-term objectives as to why you're seeking to establish TNE and what benefits you hope to reap from that. We do have a celebrity question from Brett Goldsmith. Great to see your name pop up, Brett. Brett is asking Karen, does ASQA's work require it to travel offshore to inspect provider facilities? And what context, how often, and who bears the cost of that activity? Thanks very much, Karen.
Hi, great question. Yes, we do. We have the authority to go offshore and audit any campuses that are delivering vet, just like we do onshore. That the triggers for that can be varied. There's no real one trigger. Obviously, if we are, reviewing your provider through renewal, through change to scope, you're adding something on scope that we identified offshore, or if we're just doing a general compliance monitoring audit, we can choose to go offshore and look at your facilities and look at your training offshore. So, and there's not a timing you know, like we don't say, oh, we're going to look every year at each provider. No, like it comes down to our regulatory risk priorities. It comes down to our program of regulatory approach at the time. And, you know, just to be clear, we are a risk-based regulator, so we're not going to look at everyone all the time. But there will be triggers along the way that we may decide to come out and have a look, good or bad. I will flag the costs involved that in our current charging framework and the Charges Act, the ASQA's Charging Act, and we are a cost recovered agency. So if we do come out to audit you, the provider does bear the cost of the travel costs, noting we will make those reasonable. We're not going to be going out and staying at the Shangri-La or whatever, you know, that it's a reasonable amount. Generally, when we have done offshore audits, we try to combine multiple audits at once so that not one provider bears the costs of like the flights or accommodation. We try to make it extremely reasonable. So we don't try to be very lavish with that. And we try to do as much as we can onshore. Honestly, we try to get enough evidence from you to assure our satisfaction and your compliance from Australia. But if we do need to, we will go offshore. So I hope that answered Brett's question. It was a very good question.
Thanks so much, Karen. Thanks, Brett. And that does bring us to the end of our time together, but you will see on screen now upcoming opportunities to re-engage with us for more detail about specific regions and countries, and you can register for EDI via the QR code on your screen. So it's an enormous thanks to our speakers. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel of experts today, and I thank you too for taking the time to join us, and we'll see you soon at our next VET TNE webinar. Thanks so much.